Today, we're going to shed some light on India becoming a superpower in the near future. Not only will we be looking at the military strengths of India, but also its growing economic potential. While the country's population makes up more than 15% of the entire global population, can this enormous figure be used to the country's advantage? And how does India actually compare to the actual superpowers of today? Let's find out in this video. Let's start with an economic overview of India, while we compare it with a renounced global superpower such as the US. If we're looking at the total budget, India's total sits at about $173 billion, which is about the 23rd highest in the world. While India still has 23 more countries to surpass before having the highest budget in the world, the US already enjoys the position, with its total budget sitting at $2.45 trillion. And this is despite the fact that the US total population is less than a quarter of India. Similarly, India's GDP sits at a staggering $1.84 trillion, which is ranked 11th in the world. However, US's GDP is around $15.68 trillion, which is 9 times higher than that of India. But do the GDP and budgets provide enough information to make an accurate prediction about this? Perhaps not. This might require a more detailed look into the Indian economy while we weigh the pros against the cons and determine where the country stands realistically. India is transitioning to a free market economy, yet remnants of its previous authoritarian policies linger. Economic liberalization initiatives, including industrial deregulation, state-owned firm privatization, and reduced constraints on international trade and investment, only began in the early 1990s and have helped to increase the country's growth, which has averaged less than 7% per year since 1997. Traditional village farming, contemporary agriculture, handicrafts, a vast range of modern businesses, and a number of services are all an essential part of India's varied economy. It is no secret that India's economy heavily relies on agriculture as well, with it employing slightly more than half of the workforce, while services are India's main source of economic growth, accounting for roughly 2/3 of the country's GDP while employing less than 1/3 of its people. India has actually become a major exporter of information technology services, corporate outsourcing services, and software workers, thanks to its vast educated English-speaking population. The Indian economy returned strongly from the global financial crisis in 2010, thanks in large part to strong local demand, and real growth exceeded 8% year-on-year. However, in 2011, India's economic development slowed due to a reduction in government spending and a drop in investment, both of which were caused by investor skepticism about the government's commitment to further economic reforms and the worldwide situation. The government's fuel subsidy costs have been compounded by high international petroleum prices, adding to a larger fiscal deficit and increasing current account imbalance. To reverse India's slowdown, the Indian government proposed new reforms and deficit reduction measures in late 2012, including allowing increased foreign participation in the economy's direct investment. Due to a younger population and low dependency ratio, robust savings and investment rates, and rising integration into the global economy, the projection for India's medium-term growth is optimistic. Similarly, poverty, violence, corruption, and discrimination against women and girls, ineffective enforcement of intellectual property rights, an inefficient power generation and distribution system, decades-long civil litigation dockets, inadequate transport and agricultural infrastructure, limited non-agricultural employment opportunities, and insufficient availability of quality basic and higher education are all long-term challenges that India has yet to fully overcome or even address. It's safe to say that while India's economy appears to be excelling at a pretty decent pace, there may be quite a number of problems the country needs to get over before it can begin to have the economic superiority of the rest of the world. If the aim is to become a superpower, it may not be impossible for a country like India, but it does appear that it's going to be quite a while before we can see the country becoming an economic superpower. That's enough about the economic strength and weaknesses of the country. After all, India does have a mighty military capability, doesn't it? Not many would doubt that. However, when we compare India's military might to the likes of the US and China, how do the countries end up looking? That's what we're looking to find out. Are the differences so minimal that India can actually hope to overcome them over the following years? Or is the US so advanced that other countries have little hope of catching it up? Let's dig right in. Before we take a closer look at the Indian Army's and military's sheer strength and capabilities, it is important to note that the country is a nuclear power after all. In 1958, India began a nuclear power program, followed by a nuclear weapons program in 1968. The country publicly proclaimed itself a nuclear weapon state, after conducting a nuclear device test in 1974 and 5 subsequent nuclear weapons-related tests in 1998. New Delhi's supply of weapons-grade plutonium is estimated to be between 240 and 395 kilograms, enough to make 40 to 90 basic fission warheads depending on the sophistication of the warhead design. Comparing India's nuclear might to the US might make it appear like the previous numbers were nothing more than a joke, but the reality is quite different. While the US possesses enough nukes to bomb our entire planet thrice, India's total number of warheads is far, far less. Surprisingly, the United States has an extremely large nuclear arsenal, with roughly 10,350 undamaged warheads, 5,300 of which are deemed active or operational, as one of the 5 acknowledged nuclear weapons states under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT. There are approximately 4,530 strategic warheads operational, with 1,150 deployed on land-based missile systems. While India's less than 100 nuclear warheads may not be enough to give competition to the US, that number, combined with nuclear capability, is more than enough to act as a deterrent against any country in the world. However, what if we're looking at some of the more conventional details? After all, what would happen if India were to face an opponent directly without any threats or use of nuclear bombs? Let's have a look. India has been attempting to develop and deploy ballistic and other missiles for about 2 decades. The Prithvi 1, 150 km range, and Prithvi 2, 250 km range, ballistic missiles have finished their user testing, and both variants have been inducted into the Indian Army and Air Force. The naval variant of the Prithvi has completed sea trials and is ready for induction, at least according to India's Defence Research and Development Organisation. Between May 1989 and January 2001, 5 different versions of the intermediate-range Agni ballistic missile were tested. If we're looking at the Indian Army, conflicting numbers, opinions, and thoughts exist. The Army is India's senior military service, and it has a long history of being heavily armored, with over 3,500 main battle tanks in its arsenal. Pakistan, on the other hand, has 2,400. The majority of India's tanks are Russian-made, with over 1,000 contemporary T-90 tanks in service. To keep the state manufacturer happy, the government pushed the Army to buy 124 of these tanks. Despite revisions, Indian defense buyers continue to prefer Russian equipment because it is both familiar and reliable. India is in talks with Russia to purchase the ultramodern T-14 Armata main combat tank in the near future. There is some good news for India. The government has 21 satellites, at least half of which is used for image and information collecting, which substantially aids in gaining a good picture of what is going on in the battle space, especially given the remote and mountainous nature of the prospective operational region. The Army has a number of highly trained troops, including the 89,500 Indo-Tibetan Border Police and other locally recruited groups that specialize in high-altitude combat and guerrilla operations. This is on top of the 12 mountain divisions that have already been deployed. Furthermore, India's army has fought in multiple conflicts, whereas China's army has not. China's most recent war occurred in 1979 when it invaded Vietnam and withdrew 3 weeks later after suffering tens of thousands of deaths. In 2018, the US and Russia agreed to a $5.5 billion purchase for 5 S-400 air defense missile batteries. India is also in talks with Israel about purchasing more air defense systems. It remains to be seen how these many systems will interact with one another and be integrated into a single air defense architecture, but this crash armaments modernization program could make a significant impact in any future confrontation. Are the Indian economy and military comparable to the current superpowers such as the US? Perhaps. But it does not come anywhere near to overtake the current superpowers. To be able to do that, India still may have quite a long way to go. So that is all the time we had today. Hope you enjoyed this video. Do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel, and do hit the bell icon to remain updated about all our future videos. See you all next time.